In the winter of 1885, a traveling salesman knocked on the door of Grey Hollow Estate in rural Vermont, seeking shelter from a blizzard. The man who answered was gaunt, hollow-eyed, and warned him that certain rooms were forbidden. When the salesman asked why, Silas Greymont simply replied, "Because some things once seen can never be unseen." That night, the salesman heard footsteps from the fourth floor, a floor Silas claimed was empty. Before we delve into the chilling story of Silas Greymont and the secrets he guards at Grey Hollow Estate, I want to ask you to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our darkest stories. Also, give this video a like if you're ready for a truly disturbing tale, and let me know in the comments what city and country you're listening from. I love connecting with our global community of mystery lovers. What happened at Grey Hollow Estate would challenge everything people believed about medical ethics and human decency in 19th century America. According to local accounts and fragmented records that surfaced years later, the truth behind Silas Greymont's vigil was far more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. In 1885, the Green Mountains of Vermont were dotted with isolated estates belonging to wealthy families who had made their fortunes in the timber and railroad industries. Grey Hollow Estate sat on 200 acres of dense woodland, 15 miles from the nearest town of Millbrook. The three-story Victorian mansion, with its distinctive fourth-floor tower, had been built in 1860 by Dr. Marcus Gray, a prominent physician who had studied at Harvard Medical School and later established what he called a private medical research facility. Dr. Gray was known throughout the region as a progressive thinker who advocated for new treatments of mental ailments and physical deformities. He frequently wrote letters to medical journals proposing radical surgical procedures and psychological interventions that were considered avant-garde for the time. The Vermont Medical Society held him in high regard, and he often consulted on difficult cases at the state asylum in Brattleboro and the Rutland County Poorhouse. Silas Greymont had arrived at the estate in 1878 as a young man of 22, hired as Dr. Gray's personal assistant and groundskeeper. Born to a poor farming family in nearby Woodstock, Silas had received basic education from the local pastor and showed an unusual aptitude for reading and organizing documents. Dr. Gray took a particular interest in him, teaching him basic medical procedures and involving him in his research activities. The estate operated with minimal staff, just Silas, a cook named Mrs. Hartwell who came twice weekly from town, and occasional visits from Dr. Gray's medical colleagues. This isolation was deliberate, as Dr. Gray claimed it provided the quiet environment necessary for his delicate research work. Local residents rarely visited, as the doctor discouraged social calls, stating that interruptions could compromise his patients' treatment. For 7 years, this routine continued without incident. Dr. Gray would receive patients, usually individuals suffering from what he termed severe psychological disturbances or congenital abnormalities, and conduct extended treatment sessions in the specially equipped rooms on the estate's second and third floors. These patients typically stayed for several weeks or months before being discharged to other facilities, or, as Dr. Gray reported to authorities, returning to their families in improved condition. On March 15, 1885, Dr. Marcus Gray suffered a massive stroke while working in his private study. Silas found him collapsed over his desk, surrounded by patient files and anatomical drawings. The doctor died within hours, but not before grasping Silas's hand and whispering urgent instructions about protecting the work and ensuring that no one discovers what must remain hidden. In the days following Dr. Gray's death, officials from the Vermont Medical Society arrived to settle his affairs and transfer his patients to appropriate facilities. However, they encountered an unexpected problem. There were no current patients at the estate. Dr. Gray's records indicated that his last patient had been discharged 3 months earlier, yet neighbors had reported seeing lights in the upper floors and hearing sounds, suggesting the presence of multiple people as recently as the week before the doctor's death. When the officials attempted to conduct a thorough inventory of the estate, They found that Silas had locked the fourth floor and claimed to have lost the key. He insisted that the floor contained only storage rooms filled with outdated medical equipment and personal belongings that held no value. The officials, eager to complete their business quickly and return to their practices in Burlington and Montpellier, accepted this explanation and sealed the estate pending the settlement of Dr. Gray's will. The will revealed that Dr. Gray had left the entire property to Silas Graymont, along with a modest sum for maintenance, on the condition that he maintain the integrity of the research facility and preserve all materials for future scientific advancement. Legal experts puzzled over this unusual bequest, but since Dr. Gray had no living relatives and the will was properly witnessed, the transfer proceeded without challenge. Within weeks of taking ownership, Silas began exhibiting strange behaviors that concerned the few people who interacted with him. Mrs. Hartwell reported that he had dismissed her services and now maintained the estate entirely alone. The postmaster in Millbrook noticed that Silas made weekly trips to town not for supplies, but to purchase specific items: formaldehyde, glass containers, and medical instruments from a supplier in Boston. Most disturbing were the reports from hunters and loggers who worked in the surrounding forest. They claimed to see lights moving through the fourth-floor windows late at night, and some reported hearing what sounded like muffled voices or machinery operating in the early morning hours. When questioned, Silas would only say that he was maintaining Dr. Gray's legacy and that certain aspects of the work required ongoing attention. As months passed, Silas Graymont's isolation deepened, and the mystery surrounding Gray Hollow Estate began attracting attention from unexpected sources. In November 1885, a reporter from the Rutland Herald named James Whitmore arrived in Millbrook, investigating rumors of irregularities in patient transfers from various state institutions. His inquiry had been prompted by families who claimed their relatives had been sent to Dr. Gray's facility but had never returned home or been transferred to other known institutions. Whitmore's preliminary research revealed disturbing gaps in the official records. The Vermont State Asylum had documented sending 12 patients to Gray Hollow Estate between 1880 and 1884, but only 3 discharge records could be located. The Rutland County Poorhouse had similar discrepancies, with 7 individuals transferred to Dr. Gray's care, but no corresponding documentation of their subsequent placement. When Whitmore attempted to interview Silas about these missing patients, he found the man dramatically changed from the descriptions provided by earlier visitors. Silas had lost considerable weight, his hair had prematurely grayed, and he exhibited nervous habits such as constantly checking the locks on doors and windows. Most unnervingly, he would pause conversations mid-sentence to listen intently to sounds that others could not hear. During their meeting in the estate's main parlor, Silas insisted that all patient records had been properly maintained and transferred to appropriate authorities. However, when Whitmore asked specific questions about individuals' names and conditions, Silas became increasingly agitated. He repeatedly stated that Dr. Gray's methods were advanced for the time, and that future medical professionals would understand the necessity of his work. The interview was cut short when Silas claimed to hear patients calling from the upper floors. He excused himself and spent nearly an hour upstairs before returning to find that Whitmore had departed. That evening, Whitmore wrote in his notes, "There is something fundamentally wrong at Gray Hollow Estate. Silas Graymont is either suffering from severe psychological disturbance brought on by isolation, or he is concealing information about what actually happened to the missing patients." Whitmore's investigation gained momentum when he discovered correspondence between Dr. Gray and a medical supply company in Boston. The orders, dating from 1880 to early 1885, included quantities of chemicals and equipment that seemed excessive for treating the small number of patients documented in official records. Most concerning were regular purchases of preservation solutions, photographic chemicals, and surgical instruments designed for procedures that were not commonly performed on living patients. The reporter also uncovered financial records showing that Dr. Gray had received substantial payments from wealthy families in Boston, New York, and Philadelphia for treating relatives with discrete medical conditions. These payments far exceeded typical medical fees of the period, suggesting that Dr. Gray was providing specialized services that commanded premium rates. In December 1885, Whitmore convinced the local sheriff to accompany him on an official visit to Gray Hollow Estate. Sheriff Thomas Bradford had known Dr. Gray personally and was initially reluctant to investigate, but the mounting evidence of irregularities convinced him that a formal inquiry was necessary. When they arrived at the estate, they found Silas in an even more deteriorated state. He had clearly not been maintaining basic personal hygiene, and the house showed signs of neglect despite his claims of ongoing maintenance. Most disturbing was his insistence on conducting the entire meeting in the front parlor, physically blocking access to the staircase leading to the upper floors. Sheriff Bradford attempted to exercise his legal authority to search the premises, but Silas produced a letter from a Burlington law firm stating that the estate was protected by doctor-patient confidentiality provisions and that any search would require a specific court order. The legal document appeared authentic, though Bradford later discovered that the law firm had been paid a substantial retainer by Silas to provide ongoing legal protection for the estate. Frustrated but unwilling to exceed his authority, Sheriff Bradford departed with a warning that he would return with proper legal documentation if Silas continued to obstruct legitimate inquiries. As they walked to their carriage, Whitmore noticed something that chilled him. The fourth-floor windows, which Silas claimed to contain only storage rooms, showed evidence of recent cleaning and what appeared to be new curtains. The breakthrough in the investigation came from an unexpected source. In January 1886, a former patient of Dr. Gray's named William Thorne contacted Whitmore after reading his newspaper articles. Thorne had been treated at Gray Hollow Estate in 1883 for what his family described as episodes of violent behavior, following a head injury sustained in a logging accident. Thorne's account of his time at the estate was disturbing. He described being housed not in comfortable patient rooms, but in what appeared to be converted storage areas in the basement. He recalled other patients who seemed to be suffering from severe physical ailments rather than psychological conditions. Individuals with obvious deformities, chronic illnesses, or signs of recent surgical procedures. Most alarming was Thorne's description of Dr. Gray's treatment methods. Rather than the progressive psychological therapies the doctor promoted in his medical writings, Thorne witnessed procedures that seemed designed to cause rather than alleviate suffering. He described surgical operations performed without adequate pain relief, experimental medications that caused severe reactions, and physical examinations that seemed more focused on documentation than diagnosis. Thorne had been released after 6 weeks when his condition spontaneously improved, but he remembered that several other patients who had arrived before him were still at the estate when he left. Dr. Gray had told him these individuals required extended treatment protocols and that their recovery would take considerably longer. When Whitmore asked why Thorne had never reported these observations to authorities, the man explained that Dr. Gray had convinced him that the other patients were receiving cutting-edge treatments that were not yet widely understood. The doctor had sworn him to secrecy, claiming that premature disclosure of his methods could compromise ongoing research that would eventually benefit countless sufferers. Armed with Thorne's testimony, Whitmore and Sheriff Bradford obtained a court order to search Gray Hollow Estate. However, when they arrived on February 12, 1886, they found the property apparently abandoned. The front door was unlocked, and there was no sign of Silas anywhere on the first 3 floors. The house was eerily quiet, with a layer of dust suggesting that no one had lived there for several weeks. If this story is sending chills down your spine, you're not alone. The mystery of Gray Hollow Estate has haunted Vermont for generations. Share this video with someone who loves dark historical mysteries. Give it a like if you're brave enough to hear what they discovered next, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that blur the line between history and horror. Now let's find out what investigators found when they finally accessed that forbidden 4th floor. The ascent to the fourth floor of Grey Hollow Estate would haunt both men for the rest of their lives. The narrow staircase was blocked by a heavy wooden door that bore multiple locks, but they found the keys hanging on a nail just inside the third-floor hallway. The door opened with considerable resistance, as if it had been sealed for months. The fourth floor had been converted into what could only be described as a comprehensive medical laboratory and documentation center. The main room contained dozens of glass specimen jars filled with preservation fluid, each carefully labeled with dates, patient initials, and anatomical descriptions. The specimens included human organs, tissue samples, and what appeared to be examples of surgical procedures performed on living subjects. Along the walls were wooden filing cabinets containing meticulously organized patient records that told a horrifying story. Dr. Gray had not been treating patients in any conventional sense. He had been conducting experimental medical procedures on individuals whom society had deemed expendable or whose disappearances would attract minimal attention. The files revealed that many patients had been acquired through arrangements with corrupt officials at state institutions. Families had been told their relatives died from their existing conditions, while in reality these individuals had been transferred to Grey Hollow Estate for use in Dr. Gray's research. The doctor had been studying human anatomy and testing surgical techniques by performing procedures on living subjects, documenting the results with scientific precision. Photographic plates found in a darkroom adjacent to the main laboratory showed the progression of various experiments. The images were clinical in nature, but depicted procedures that violated every principle of medical ethics. Dr. Gray had been systematically exploring human tolerance for surgical intervention, the effects of various chemicals on living tissue, and the progression of deliberately induced medical conditions. Most chilling was a leather-bound journal in Dr. Gray's handwriting that detailed his philosophical justification for the work. He wrote extensively about the necessary sacrifice of inferior specimens for the advancement of medical knowledge, and expressed frustration with legal and ethical constraints that limited legitimate research. He viewed his patients not as human beings deserving of care, but as scientific resources that could contribute to greater understanding of human physiology. The journal's final entries, dated just days before Dr. Gray's death, revealed his growing concern about potential discovery and his instructions to Silas about preserving the evidence. Dr. Gray believed that future medical professionals would vindicate his methods and that the documentation would prove invaluable to scientific advancement. He had ordered Silas to maintain the laboratory and continue documenting the preserved specimens until the medical community was ready to appreciate the significance of the work. Sheriff Bradford and Whitmore spent hours documenting the contents of the fourth floor, creating an inventory that would eventually span 47 pages. They identified evidence relating to at least 19 individuals who had disappeared while supposedly under Dr. Gray's care. The preservation techniques had been so effective that many specimens appeared to be only recently prepared, despite dating back several years. The search for Silas Graymont continued for weeks, but he was never found. His personal belongings remained in his room, and there was no evidence that he had planned to leave permanently. The most likely explanation was that he had wandered into the Vermont wilderness during the harsh winter and succumbed to exposure, though his body was never recovered. Whitmore's newspaper articles about the discovery created a sensation throughout New England, leading to investigations at other private medical facilities and reforms in patient transfer procedures. Several officials at state institutions were prosecuted for accepting payments to provide patients for unauthorized research, and new oversight mechanisms were established to prevent similar abuses. The families of identified victims were notified, and proper burial arrangements were made for the recovered remains. Grey Hollow Estate was sold by court order, with proceeds used to compensate families and fund improvements in mental health care throughout Vermont. The case also prompted the Vermont Medical Society to establish stricter ethical guidelines and review procedures for members conducting research. Dr. Gray's medical license was posthumously revoked, and his published papers were formally discredited by major medical journals. In the end, the horror of Grey Hollow Estate served as a stark reminder of what could happen when medical authority operated without proper oversight or moral constraint. Silas Greymont's dedication to preserving the evidence, whether driven by loyalty, guilt, or gradual understanding of the crimes he had witnessed, ultimately ensured that the victim's suffering would not be forgotten, and that justice, though delayed, would finally be served. This dark chapter in Vermont's history teaches us that the pursuit of knowledge, when divorced from human compassion and ethical responsibility, can lead to unimaginable cruelty. The missing patients of Grey Hollow Estate had been society's most vulnerable members, yet their tragic end helped establish protections that would benefit countless others in the years to come. What do you think about this chilling piece of Vermont history? Do you believe Silas was a willing accomplice or another victim of Dr. Gray's manipulation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story as disturbing as I did, subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell for more dark historical mysteries. Until next time, remember that the darkest chapters of our past often hold the most important lessons for our future.